go back through some DOM manipulation part 2, the looping. A couple of DOM looping coverages that we didn't get to earlier in the week. So what we're going to do, we're going to move pretty quickly through that because the more important lesson this morning is going to be talking about higher order functions and callbacks. So we're going to move at a pretty good clip this morning so we can get to that coverage before lunch. So let's get going. I'm going to put in the objectives into Slack here. So what we're going to take a look at this morning, we want to take a look at looping over existing objects in a page using JavaScript. We're going to create new objects using a loop, and then adding attributes to elements in a page. So again, the point of this lesson, it's using JavaScript and DOM manipulation, specifically using loops to update the DOM. So that's the goal for this morning. In the meantime, we're gonna kick it off with some Craigslist hacks. So what I want you guys to do is go to Craigslist.org. Specifically, I really don't think it matters, but if you want to go to the Atlanta Craigslist.org, the stuff we're going to do should be fine no matter where you are, but when I was going through this, I wrote these challenges on Atlanta Craigslist. I want you guys to help me find a futon, and if it's in the Atlanta area, that'd be great. And if they would deliver it, that would be super. All right, so the first two things we want to do, and I want you guys to put this into Slack. There's two questions here in Slack. How can we find all of the span tags on this page? So a quick review, if you want to put that command into Slack, how could we find all of the span tags in this page using JavaScript? And then how could we find the first one, the first span tag on this page? So I'll give you guys a second. If you agree with one of, so Zach just put in a suggestion into Slack. If you agree with that, you can give it a +1 just to kind of put your stamp of approval on it. And I am going to start my screen share so we can take a look at these. So hold tight here. All right, so we have a couple of suggestions here. Yeah, so we have document, get elements by class name, span. So is span a class? I don't think.
I'm sorry, I just changed it.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, that looks a little bit better. We're also missing one more thing in your command, but otherwise that looks pretty solid. Nice, yeah, it looks like Aaron kind of polished that up for us. Yeah, so again, there's probably a couple of ways to find this stuff. If you are following along watching my screen, we could do, actually this one is missing something. Oh, there you go, I think you just updated that, Aaron, great. Yeah, so get elements by tag name. Yep, so that's gonna return, I think we mentioned it the other day, this is gonna return a node list specifically. And just wanted to point this out to you. I think Christine put some stuff into Slack regarding node lists. So node lists, for our purposes, we can call the same methods that we could call on an array. In fact, this looks like an array. So it has the square brackets. If we open this up, we see that these different spans, so we have 219 span tags on this page. So we can use indexes to find specific ones. So for all intents and purposes, it's returning an array, but specifically when we talk about DOM manipulation, you can consider this a node list. So it's just kind of a semantic thing I wanted to make you guys aware of. Excellent. So we could use documents, get elements by tag name. I saw some more good ones in here. We could also do the document query selector. So I'm gonna grab Jason's version right here. So yeah, that's going to return some, actually, well, semantically it's a little bit different. So actually this one is technically called the node list, like we said. Up here was called an HTML collection. What if we wanted to find the first span tag, kind of building on what we have here? Let's check our Slack and see if anyone. Yeah, so Jason actually, I'm going to hit the up arrow here. So how would we get the first span tag? Well, one strategy is, since this is essentially an array and we can call indexes on it, I can do index of 0, and that'll grab the first one. What's another way that we could grab the first span tag on this page? I don't think anyone put this into Slack. Let me scroll down a little bit. What might be another way? So we could still use kind of the query selectors. And nice, Tom. Yeah, let's check that one out. So remember, query selector all returns all of something. Query selector returns the first instance of that in the DOM. So let's check out what Tom put in here. I'll just hit the up arrow and do a little bit of editing here. So let's try document.querySelector span, and sure enough, so those are two different ways to return the same DOM element. Awesome. Great work, you guys. Rocking and rolling on Friday. So that's a little bit of a warm-up for us. Now I'm going to give you guys a few minutes to do some challenges here. And I'm going to put these into Slack. The solution's also in the README for actually all of these challenges, so if you get really stuck, the solutions are in there. But I'm going to give you guys maybe a minute or two, and what I want you to do is see if you can change the inner text of all the span elements on this page to the string WDI remote. I think Tom did a really good job yesterday. You guys already did some loops and DOM manipulation with Tom's coverage, so hopefully this is a little bit of a review. But step one, change the inner text of all the span elements to that string WDI remote. And then number two, this is a little more complex. If the text in a given span, so we can see here that we have 219 span elements on this page, right? So if the text in one of these spans contains the characters ER, then change the inner text of that specific span to the string "this contains ER." Otherwise, change the inner text to "not here, buddy." So the idea, if it contains ER, just have it print one thing. If it doesn't contain the characters ER, have it print out something else. So go ahead and take 2 or 3 minutes and hack on that. Again, you're going to be using loops for both of these, obviously. You just want to get a little bit of practice in using loops for DOM manipulation. And I'll stop sharing my screen for these 2 or 3 minutes. And if you do get an answer, go ahead and put it into Slack.
I have a question. We still need to do this on the Craigslist page?
Yeah, please just do this on Craigslist. And you can actually do this stuff in the console if you want. I'm going to share my screen just for a second.
Okay.
So in the interest of time, we're just going to play around in the JavaScript console. I don't know if we've talked about this, but when you're creating these loops, you're going to need to do it on different lines. So if you need to create a new line in the Chrome console, you want to hit Shift and Enter. Sometimes it's a little, yeah, I don't think we've gone over that so far. It's a little tricky. A lot of times I will do, if I'm doing kind of block pieces of code, a lot of times I'll do it in like in Atom. Actually, if you want to build this in Atom, copy, paste it into the console, that's totally cool. But the way that you would do that is, for example, like this is the first line. And then go ahead and hit Shift, hold down Shift and Enter, and that'll get you on the second line. And sometimes that takes some getting used to. Sometimes you may accidentally hit Enter and run the code, you know, if you didn't hold down Shift correctly, and that's okay. If you do screw that up somehow, you can always just push the up arrow and go in here and kind of start over and move things around. But if you're more comfortable testing this out, like in Atom, just open up an empty file, or even if you want to go to Replit, again, just to kind of like bang the stuff out and then copy it and paste it to test it out, that's totally cool. But yeah, I think all 3 of these answers, you'll probably need like maybe 3 lines to do it if you're formatting it, you know, properly. All right, I see Jason has uploaded a screenshot. Yeah, very cool. It looks good. Adam also uploaded one. Nice. Those look pretty good. Give you guys a few more minutes to hack on that. And then Adam or Jason, if you want, well, let's hold off a few seconds, and then maybe if one of you want to put your code into Slack. And just like a refresher, if you guys are watching my Slack window, a good way to copy code, to paste code into Slack is to do 3 backticks. So the backticks on your Mac, it's that key just to the left of the number 1 key at the top of the keyboard. So you can do 3 backticks. You can hit Shift and Enter to get to a new line. So Shift and Enter works in Slack. Shift and Enter also works in the console as well. And then put some code, and then you could do the 3 backticks after it. So you want to start and end your block of code with backticks. And actually, you could even like put the backticks on one line if you wanted. And that'll kind of do it like a pre-formatting box for the code. Usually you'll use the 3 backticks if you're doing a block of code. If you're just going to put something like a 1 line, you can use a single backtick. It's going to look slightly different. It's going to give it a little bit of that red, that highlighting, but those are just 2 techniques you can use. And if you notice right here at the bottom of the Slack window, Slack's really helpful. It has a couple of little kind of pointer shortcuts at the bottom. So once I start typing in here, if you guys notice at the bottom, it's really, really faint, but it says bold, italics, strike, code, pre-formatted. It's really hard to see on my screen. Maybe you guys can see it on yours. I'll see if I can make it larger here. But it actually gives you examples of how to format the message. So here for bold, you can see that if you put that, kind of star, the word, and then another star, it'll make it bold. And then you can see the other stuff there. By the way, you guys probably notice I'm using the browser for Slack. So I think I mentioned that earlier this week. I've been testing out, instead of using the Slack native software that I downloaded, I've been doing everything in the browser. And I really have noticed like a little bit of the performance. The performance of my machine has been a little bit better, because periodically, if I had too much stuff open, I would get like your CPU is using a lot of memory and such. And using Slack in the browser, I have not gotten those messages. I don't even think I've gotten one in the past few days. So if you want to try that out on your machine, that may give you a little bit more memory bandwidth. Just log into Slack, and I also have this other Chrome plugin. This is called OneTab. I don't know if you guys use this. OneTab's pretty cool. I'm going to open up a new window here. And OneTab is just a Chrome extension. But what it does, because I'm sure we're all guilty of this, like sometimes I'll have like 10, 15, 20 tabs open at one time, like if I'm going to like read something later, and then eventually like I never get to it. So this OneTab is a really handy extension, because you can click on it, and what it will do is it'll condense all of those tabs that you have open, pretty much the content of that window with all the tabs, and it'll condense it into kind of a list of the tabs. And let me show you what that looks like. So if I click on this extension, for example, here's 5 tabs that I had open a few days ago. And so when I closed the window, I clicked that button, and it kind of saved those tabs for me. So if I want to reopen those tabs, all I have to do is hit Restore All, and then you can see, bam, it just reopens them all. So what I did is kind of a shortcut, because I usually have like 3 Slack channels open, is I created one of these OneTab kind of bookmark placeholders. So as soon as I open Chrome in the morning, or if I want to get started before class, all I have to do is hit this Restore All, and it'll open up a new window with my 3 Slack channels already open. Oh, there we go, my high CPU usage. So maybe that'll be helpful. I'll Slack that out later. But if you want to go to the Google Chrome extension, just look for one tab, and it's kind of a helpful productivity tool that I use. All right, enough of life hacks with Mark. Let's get to it. So Jason and or Adam, would you guys mind pasting in your code for the first example where we were trying to get WDI remote, the inner text on all the span elements? Cool, looks like Jason has the second challenge there. All right, so Adam pasted in some code, so let's test this out. So I'm gonna clear my console. The way that I do that is I can hold down Command K just to give myself some real estate. Let me get rid of that one too. Command K is a really handy one. Let's take a look. So looks like Adam, cool, so we have our for loop. We're instantiating our index at 0. Then while document.getElements by tag name span.length. So as long as the length is less than 219, because we have 219 spans on this page, and then we'll increment the index by 1 each time. And then for document.getElements by tag name span, so each one will do .innerHTML WDI or WDI remote. And the parens right there. Clean this up a little bit. Cool. And then if we run that, then yeah, that looks great. So we used a loop to change the inner text of some elements. Yeah, that's awesome. Let me, I'm going to refactor this code slightly. This is a little, well, it's kind of in topic, but I just want to, as we get into higher, into more DOM manipulation and such, this is just a really quick kind of pointer. So the way that this code is written now, consider that underneath the hood, every time that we run this loop, our browser is having to rerun this getElements by tag name span. So this loop is running 219 times, right, for each span. Every time it does that, it's having to do another, parse the DOM and get that document.getElements by tag name span. So, for this, we can barely see a performance difference, but if we're dealing with much, much larger, yesterday you guys were like throwing like 1,000 elements onto the DOM and such. I think Tom had you guys doing that. So eventually this gets really expensive. So a more efficient way to do this performance-wise is I'm going to assign this to a variable that I can reuse. So I'm going to run this document getElements by tag name. I'm going to grab those elements in that node list one time, store it into a variable, then that variable is stored in memory. So I can reuse that variable, and I only have to reuse one piece of memory, location or whatever you want to call it, versus the 219 times that the browser has to keep grabbing those elements by tag name. So I'm going to refactor this slightly just for demonstration purposes. So maybe I want to do all span tags equals, and then I'll go ahead and assign this to that variable. And then down here, again, instead of grabbing all of my span tags 219 times, I'm going to put all span tags right here, and it's going to be a little quicker under the hood, a little bit more efficient. Then I will also replace this. And again, this is essentially, it's the same thing. We're just making this computationally. It's going to be a little more efficient performance-wise to do it this way. So let me change this inner text just for grins. So we'll see this when I run it. Happy Friday. Then if I run that, it updates the DOM. We get the same result, but just kind of something to keep in mind. Generally, it's going to be cheaper and less expensive to assign things like this to a variable and then use that variable in your code. I'll paste this into Slack for you guys. Any questions about that? Alrighty, so let's take a look at the second one. So Yeah, it looks like Jason got the result we were looking for. So Jason, would you or another volunteer want to put in your code for number 2 into Slack? Cool. I'm going to refresh my page just to kind of clear it out. And then let's take a look at what Jason came up with here. Oh, cool. Looks like Jason used a variable. Very nice. Let me copy that, paste it in here. We'll take a look. So yeah, like we just mentioned, this is really nice. Very efficient way to save some memory space and such. So Jason is assigning, again, that node list with all of those 219 spans, assigning it to a variable called span list. That's awesome. And then the for loop here, let's see, we got our for loop, looks good. And then, yeah, so kind of the goal of this little goofy exercise was to use this index of. So when you use index of, we've looked at that one before, and I'm pretty sure that was in your fundamentals. Index of is a way to check for, in an array or in a string, to check for characters or a specific sequence of characters, a specific word or object or something. So index of, if it is included in whatever you're searching for, it's going to return a -1. Sorry, it's going to return a -1 if it doesn't exist in that array. So if I have an array of, cat, dog, bird, and I do the index of lizard, lizard doesn't exist in that array, so it would return a -1. If it does exist in the array, it's going to return a 0. So it's kind of a binary type of method. So this is really nice. So if each individual span, we're looking for the characters ER. So if it doesn't equal -1, which is essentially saying if it equals 0, then we'll change it to this contains ER. Else, spanless I enter text not here buddy. Very nice. Yeah, and so since we're just doing 2 conditionals, we're just doing if and else, I don't really have to put any kind of logic here for this else, right? If this first if statement, if this doesn't evaluate to true, meaning if a span doesn't contain ER, then just do whatever's in this else block. Really nice. All right, so let's run this, see how it goes. I'm going to put some little curlies on here just to clean this up. I'm really bad about forgetting curly sometimes. But yeah, I think that looks good. All right, let's run it. Cool, so some of these spans that contain the characters ER. So this contains ER, and then the rest just are gonna say not here, buddy. Very nice, that looks good. Did anyone do that in a different way? So it's like Eric had some different code here. Oh, so you tried includes, nice. Let's see, did that one work for you, Eric? Or I think you said it did not work. Let's see, so actually let me refresh again just to clear it out. So our for loop, did I miss something? Did you assign? So Eric, I don't see that you assigned the document get elements by tag name or the query selector. I don't see where your spans variable is assigned. But what we could do is, I think this is what you were going for. I'll use query selector. Something like that. So then spans.length, var boolean, spans I includes ER. Okay, so that variable is going to be kind of reassigned with each loop. Then for each individual span includes ER, if bool. Okay, so instead of putting this condition inside of the kind of the if block here, you put it outside. Okay. So I guess, Eric, what you're thinking is that this should either evaluate to true or false, the Boolean true or false, which is why you called it Boolean. That's really good. And then spans I, then change that span to that. Let's run that. Let's see what happens. Spans I includes not a function. Yeah, dot includes, I'd have to look at the documentation. It may not, we may be missing something here in the documentation. Christine saying the parameters for includes matter, it seems. Array includes index number, string includes string. Yeah, let's take a look at that later. But yeah, I just need to check out the documentation. I would imagine that we can make that work though, for sure. Cool, I'm gonna unshare my screen briefly. So again, just wanted to kick the tires and see DOM manipulation using a loop. Any questions about that before we move forward? Cool, okay, so let's do a little bit of a code along for this next one. What I want to do is now we're going to try appending the string hi there to our span tags. So now we're actually going to walk through creating a new element and then appending that to an element in the DOM. So let's take a quick look at that, and then I want to get you guys to some exercise time. And I'm going to share my screen, and you can follow along. I'll put this code in as we go through it. There's also a solution at the bottom of the README, but in the interest of time, let's just take a look at this and then get y'all to some lab time. I'm going to clear this out. I'm going to refresh. So we're still going to be playing around with Craigslist for this example. And what we want to do, again, we want to append the string hi there to all the span tags. So our previous example, we actually kind of changed the inner text or the text content to something. Now we're going to see what it's like to create a loop to append elements to the DOM. So if you're following along, the first thing that we're going to do is pretty much what we did in the last section. We're going to grab all the span tags first. And does someone want to explain back why we're assigning this to a variable? Why are we assigning this to a variable? Why don't we just run document.get elements by tag name inside our loop? What is the advantage to assigning this to a variable first? Yeah, Dana, so it's definitely dry. And I think Jason's a little closer to why we want to do this. Yeah, so Jason says that it's more memory efficient. That's absolutely correct. Yeah, and then Jesse, a corollary of that would be, or a result of it being more memory efficient, is that our page is going to load quicker. Yeah, absolutely. Now, in this Craigslist example, we can't really see the benefits of that, the performance benefits. But if we're dealing with more of a full stack, particularly when we get into like Angular, some other front-end JavaScript libraries, we mentioned React, Ionic, all those buzzwords. So those are very, very much reliant on the DOM and updating the DOM in a very quick way. And so these types of strategies are really going to help out the efficiency of those larger frameworks. When we're just searching for a futon, it's like, all right. All right, cool. So step one, let's assign all of the span tags to this variable, all span tags. And just to confirm that, once I run that little line, I can do all span tags, and I can see that I have this collection of 219 span tags. Cool. So after we've done that, and that's stored in memory, so now as long as I don't refresh the page, I have that all span tags available to me. So I'm going to move forward to the for loop. And kind of the shell of the for loop, you guys are super savvy at this now. I'll put this into Slack. So here's kind of the shell of our loop. So we have the for loop, and then we're going to put something inside of this for loop. This is pretty much what we just did. So we're starting the index counter at 0. And as long as the I is less than 219, we're going to continue to do the guts of this loop, if you will. And then step 3, the first step that we're going to do, if we're going to add a new element to each span tag on Craigslist, before we even try to attach something, we need to think through creating that element first that we're later going to append to those span tags. So this is what the inside of the loop is going to look like. So the first thing we're going to do is actually create that new div. And we'll do that using document.create element. And the type of element we're going to create is a div element. And then we're going to give it some content. So in this example, I'm creating a variable called new content and doing a document.create text node. And I'm just going to put the string hi there in all caps. Super, super creative here. So that would be my next step. So it looks something like that. Now I can run this and it's really, it's not going to do anything because we're creating the divs, but we haven't appended them to the body yet, so we can't see anything happen. So you guys were doing this yesterday with Tom. The next step in this process is we would want to use append child. So now that we have the new div that we created and the text node, the content, now we want to append that text to that div directly. And so this line of code will do that. Take this new div and append this new content to it. And then finally, the last step here is we want to grab that all span tags, and for each span tag, let's append the child of the new div. So we created a new div, we put some text content inside it called new content, and then we're going to attach that hi there string to each span tag. Cool, so let's just run this, see it in action. I have a solution here in my code. So in the interest of time, I'm just going to paste this into Slack, and you guys can copy and run this. Now for this example, for this solution, I actually encapsulated this code into a function. So this code actually isn't going to execute until we run the add element, until we call the function here at the bottom of this code. So I'm going to paste this into Slack, and then we'll see it in action. So there's really no, there's not any magic here. I just took all of the variable assignment and the for loop, and I just wrapped it in a function. And then the function is called add element, and at the bottom I call add element. So I'm going to clear out my console. I'll paste this in here. Should have put a semicolon at the end. So let me run this, and there we go. So we still see the original span tag in the DOM here in the browser, but what we're doing is appending this extra element to each span tag called hi there. Pretty exciting stuff. I'll stop my share for a moment. So any questions about that? Hopefully some of this is a little bit familiar, a little bit review. See if someone has a question here. So Zach's asking, what is a text node? A P. No, so it's a text node would be the literal text inside of a tag. So a P would be considered a tag. The text would be whatever you put inside that tag, be it a P tag or an H1, a div, a span, whatever you chose. Cool, so it's 12 o'clock. What I want to do, I want to get you guys to a little bit of an exercise and get you guys practice with this. Let me share my screen one more time. So there's one small section here at the end of the lesson. I'll paste this into Slack. So this is going to be helpful for the little lab I'm about to give you. So what I would like for you guys to do, I'm going to put you in the breakout rooms. I would encourage you to just take a quick peek at this. If you get stuck, you may be able to figure out the exercise regardless. In fact, I have all the confidence that you will be able to. But there's something in the exercise that this pertains to. So if you get stuck, check out this part of the lesson plan. But I just want to go ahead and get you guys started in the interest of time. So what I want you guys to do this morning is this lab that I'm pasting into Slack. So go ahead and click on that. So yesterday with Tom, yeah, let me do a, before we move forward, I just want to make sure that because I know that we're moving a little quickly this morning. Let me stop my share for just a moment. Let me do a quick check-in with you guys. Give me a fist of 5 if you understood kind of the two sections of the lesson that we just went through. So 5 being I totally killed it, a 0 being okay. All right, so I see some good fingers, looking good out there. Again, hopefully, if some of this is not quite gelling, this exercise will be helpful. And then again, we'll have review time this afternoon if you guys want to go over anything specifically. Cool. All right, I'm going to share my screen and get you guys rocking and rolling here. So yesterday in Tom's lesson, you guys were playing around with tic-tac-toe, so I thought we would kind of kick that up a notch. So this is a tic-tac-toe DOM exercise. And the goal of this exercise, I'm going to give you a code pin that has HTML and CSS for a tic-tac-toe board. Your exercise is to completely recreate that board using only JavaScript. So your code pin should not have any HTML code and it should not have any CSS code. Let me send you the starter code, the code pin that we'll start with. So you'll need to go to this code pin and be sure to fork it. So be sure to fork this before you start working on it. And here's what the code pin looks like. So it's pretty basic. It's just 9 divs. I have the number, for each div. So consider if this was tic-tac-toe, we'd want to keep track. We'd want to give each specific square, there's 9 of them, we'd want to keep track of the individual squares, whether they have an X and O, whether or not they've been clicked or not. So in order to do that, probably a good strategy would be to add an ID to each square. Why would we want to add an ID to each square to keep track of the X's and the O's? Why might we want to use an ID for that? I'll put this question into Slack. And Jason's got it. You guys are too quick for me. Yeah, so we want to use an ID because ID should only exist on one element on a page. So if we put a unique ID on each square, it's really easy to track whether that square contains an X or no. That's great. So if you guys are looking at this code pin, it's pretty straightforward. The HTML is here. I created 9 divs. Those are in an outside div called a board. This is just how I set it up. I really don't care what you guys do. I just want it to look like this. You can have a different background color if you want. No biggie, but I would encourage you to try to make the borders look like this. And then here's the CSS. So in this starter code, I'm just using 2 CSS rules. One rule for the board class, and then one for kind of each div within that board. And if we look at the README, I'll post these instructions into Slack. If I can find go back one more. Yeah, so Christine mentions in order to fork it, sign up for an account. It takes a second. Yeah, I think you can sign up with your GitHub if you want. Or if you don't want to fork it, feel free to just create a new anonymous pin, and then you can copy this code into that to get started. But as far as the challenges, what I want you guys to do, again, try to recreate that goofy game board using only JavaScript. And additionally, I want you guys to add the ID on each square that corresponds with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I want you guys to add an ID to each square as well. Here's some stretch goals. So if you get through with that, see if you can use EMs instead of PX. So in my example, I just used PXs, PXEs, whatever it is, pixels. See if you can play around with EMs just to get some exercise with that. If you get done with that, see if you can create a button that will give each square a new random color when you click it. So I think that you guys were touching on that yesterday. I think Tom had you guys hovering over elements to change the color. So you can add that in there. Also, see if you can add a click event or a click add event listener that when you click on a square, it'll console log the ID of that square. So those are just some stretch goals. I'm gonna stop my screen share now. We'll take, I'd love to get this wrapped up by maybe like 12:30. I know that we're a little tight on time this morning, but we'll take maybe 15, 16 minutes on this. I'm gonna put you into breakout rooms, and then we'll come back, and I'd love to see what you guys come up with. So any questions before we get started? Any questions about what we're building? All right.
Hey, Mark.
Yeah.
Are we supposed to build this board first with JavaScript, or are we working with the HTML and CSS that's there in order to make the game function with JavaScript? Like add the X's and the O's?
Yeah. Don't worry about any of the logic. This has nothing to do with the logic of the game. It's strictly, the goal of this exercise is to try to build this board. I gave you the HTML and the CSS to start, and hopefully that'll, if you see the HTML and CSS, maybe it'll like trigger some ideas on how to build it with JavaScript. But yeah, don't worry about the logic. It's merely to try to make the board using JavaScript, make it look just like it did with HTML and CSS. And you guys are perfectly, we've gone over all of this stuff, so you'll need to do some create elements. You're going to need to create some for loops to create each square. So, but you certainly know how to add style properties to elements. We've gone over that kind of stuff. So it's a little bit of kind of a comprehensive review of some of the stuff we've gone through this week. But yeah, don't worry about game logic. It's merely just to try to make this red game board in JavaScript that looks just like it did in HTML and CSS. Alrighty.
Quick question, Mark. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no sweat.
So we fork it and kind of review the HTML and CSS, and then can we just clear that and then head straight to just JavaScript?
Yeah, absolutely. Once you fork this pin, if you just want to like comment out that code and just work in the JavaScript window, that's fine. Initially, if we had more time, I was going to have you just bang it out in HTML and CSS and then like do it in JavaScript. But in the interest of time this morning, I'm just going to go ahead and give you an HTML CSS version. So see if you can recreate that using JavaScript. Let me just tighten up these rooms, and I'm going to put you in there. Just give me 1 second here. All right. Just kind of going alphabetical order here. So yeah, we'll take about 15 minutes, and then I'll ping you guys, and we're going to close the room. We'll take a quick peek, and then we're going to move on to callbacks and higher order functions. So good luck, have fun with this, and I'll see you in about 15 minutes. Just ping me if you have any questions.